collecting for the missionaries for this Christmas time frame, and we said we'd take on a $250 goal that we would shoot for. I'm pleased to say that we've already taken up 176, so there's $74 left, and we've got until the 15th of this month to raise the rest of that. So if you haven't yet, or if you decide that you'd like to give more, please see Miss Pam, and by the 15th, please. We are in Genesis chapter 47, getting close to the end of Genesis. Genesis chapter 47, verse number 1 through 6. And before we actually go through number 1 through 6, just wanted to go backtrack just a shade to kind of set the scene. And look at chapter 46, starting in verse 30. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. It has been a number of years. It's been over 20 years or so, 22 years, I guess, by this point in time, that Joseph has not seen his father Jacob, or vice versa. And so Jacob is excited. He's saying, I didn't think that I'd even see you again, and now I've gotten a chance to see you again. Turns out that God will give him 17 years together, which is a good amount of time. Verse number 31. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That ye shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Canaan, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Joseph knew the Egyptians. He knew Pharaoh. He had personal audience with Pharaoh time and time again in the process of all this setting aside the grain and doling the grain out and whatever. And he knew the Egyptians. And he also knew his brethren. So he was in kind of a unique position here, and he's coaching them what to say. You're going to go see the most powerful man in the entire world. Here's what you say. Probably he doesn't, the Bible doesn't say, but I would think that he would also tell them, don't say this. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? And so he's coaching them into what to say. And the Egyptians did not like, they thought that shepherds were unclean. Dealing with animals, the Egyptians, as we said before, were very, very much clean freaks. Everything was very, a beard was, shaved, the head was shaved. I mean, for men, they were very much involved in cleanliness. And so anybody dealing with animals. So he's setting up the scene here as to what they should be doing. Verse number 1 of chapter 47. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. He goes to Pharaoh and he formally announces, and it's not like Pharaoh didn't know already, but he formally makes an announcement, my brothers are here, my father is here, and oh, by the way, they brought their herds and flocks. He's setting the stage, kind of preempting anything that may come up, and into what's going on here. And they are in the land of Goshen. They are already in Goshen. He put them there for a purpose. We talked last week about Goshen. Goshen's in northeastern area of Egypt. Goshen is about 900 square miles. The Nile Delta runs through there, and it's well watered. And because it's well watered, grasses would grow as opposed to the rest of the area where there wasn't a whole lot of water going on. So there was a good pasture land. Egyptians didn't really live there. It was kind of a desolate land, so it was a good place to live by yourself. And what have the Jews been known for wherever they go? They live by themselves. They stay separated. Even in Nazi Germany, they stayed by themselves. They were an entity. They have been dispersed ever since Roman days in the time of Christ. They've been dispersed over about 2,000 years now, and wherever they are, they're their own little enclave, which is goodness. They worship their own God, not the local God. They have their own ways, not the local ways. And they're not assimilated, which other people have been. Verse number 2. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them to Pharaoh. How many brethren did he have? Had 11, did he not? He had 11 brothers, yet he only takes 5. I got thinking about this. Why would he only take 5? Why not take all 11? Well, a couple of reasons came to mind. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. But if I saw 11 people coming at me, it'd be like, whoa, this is kind of like a mini invasion. You know, a lot of people here. 5 looks better than 11. The other factor is that of the 11 brothers total, some of them, quite frankly, were hotheads. Levi, Simeon were known to be troublemakers and hotheads. Reuben was unstable as water, as we're going to find out a little bit later on. He had weaknesses. So I'm sure that Joseph was the one who picked the 5. Now, I don't know who he picked, but if I were a betting man, I would bet that Judah was one of them, because Judah showed strength of character in offering himself as a sacrifice. And maybe baby brother Benjamin, say that 5 times, baby brother Benjamin. I bet he was one of the 5 too. We don't know who it was, but he selected 5, and he presented them to Pharaoh. Again, he knew Pharaoh, he knew his brothers. Verse 3, Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what's your occupation? They said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. They said, moreover unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come. That word sojourn means to pay a visit. It doesn't mean to stay. And so they're telling Pharaoh, apparently letting him know, we're not coming here to invade. We're not coming here to stay. We're coming here for a temporary time frame, which would make the stay a little more palatable, I would think. What do they say about house guests? They're like fish. They get bad after 3 days. For thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. They are formally requesting to stay in the land of Goshen. They're making a formal request of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. In the land of Goshen let them dwell. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, then make them rulers over my cattle. Not only is Pharaoh giving them the land, but he's also given them a job, an occupation. And they're shepherds, but they're not given a job as just being garden variety everyday shepherds. To make them rulers over my cattle. That word rulers means to be overseers. They're given a job in management, is what we would say today. So they're given a place to live and they're given employment. And Pharaoh obviously has herds and cattle of his own, and he doesn't want any part of them because they're kind of an abomination to him. So he would like to have people in charge who he can trust. So he's showing trust and faith in them. Why would he show trust and faith in the brethren? Didn't really know them, but he knew Joseph. A good testimony goes a long way. Okay, verse number 7. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, how old art thou? And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Yet few and evil have been the days of the years of my life have been. And and have not attained unto the days and the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. We don't know whether it's at the same time that the brothers had the audience or with some other time, but long and short of it is that Pharaoh meets Jacob for the first time. And he must be impressed with Jacob, because Jacob comes up and Jacob has a chance to talk to him. He gives him an audience. Pharaoh gives Jacob an audience, but he also asks him some questions. How old are you? And his response is, my days are few and evil, is what he said, if I were to paraphrase that. His days are few. Few compared to what? Few compared to Abraham. Abraham lived to be 175. Few compared to Isaac. Isaac lived to be 180. He's only 130 at this point in time, so he's not at the lifespan of what his ancestors would be. And his days are evil. The word evil means difficult. Days were difficult. We've all had evil days. We've all had difficult times. And if we haven't, buckle up, they're coming, okay? It's just part of living. So his days were evil and few. It's interesting to note, go to Hebrews 7:7. Actually, let's back up a little bit. Starting in verse 7:4. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. And verily they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law. That is their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham and blessed him that had the promises. Who's that? That's Melchizedek. Melchizedek was the priest of Salem. Okay, and it says, verse number 7, without contradiction, the less is blessed of the better. Abraham was a powerful man. Abraham was a chieftain in charge of his little group. Abraham had defeated the four kings, and he had not only defeated the four kings, but he had returned to Sodom, to the king of Sodom, all the spoils of warfare. Abraham was one important man. And yet, as one important man, he was blessed by the greater. Who was the greater? Melchizedek. So there's a precedent in the Bible of the lesser is blessed by the better. In the passage that we just read, who blessed who? Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, the most wealthy man in the world, Pharaoh, the all-powerful Pharaoh, is blessed by a 130-year-old shepherd. It's important that we understand that. Let's go on. Verse number 10. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Wait a minute, he blessed him twice. Jacob and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. The land of Ramesses. If you look at Exodus 1:11, you'll find out that in the book of Exodus, they're building treasure cities. Two of the treasure cities, one of them is Pithom, P-I-T-H-O-M is how we would spell it. The other one was Ramesses. These were in the land of Goshen. So this land was very, very good land, and they were given possession of the land. They were given the right to live in the land. They were given, if you will, a deed for that land. They didn't own the land, but they had every right to live in the land, and that was given to them by Pharaoh himself. Verse number 12. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren, and all his father's household with bread according to their families. And there was no bread in the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. It's getting tough out there. It's getting harsh. It's getting, today we are grateful and we're thankful for the fact that it's finally cooled off. These past couple, we've had what, 2 days now? 2 days of cool. I heard on the radio, I don't know how true this is, you can't believe everything on the radio, but I heard on the radio we've had over 90 days of solid temperatures over 90. 90 days. That's something else. And the other day, which was Friday, I think it was, we hit a record temperature. The record was 91. We were like 97. And we've only had that for 90 days. Imagine 7 years of that. I mean, we're dancing all around because it's 60 this morning, They're really happy campers. Their famine was sore in the land. Verse number 14, and Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Food for money. They didn't give him welfare. Do you notice that? The government did not give out. The government had taken in all the grain. They put it in, I'm imagining, silos or big places, storage places throughout the nation. They had all this grain, but the government didn't give it back to the people. They sold it to the people. Why would they not have government welfare in this situation? Pardon me? They will later on, yeah, but right now they don't. And so, why would they not? Because they did not want to make the people feel, what's the word I want to use? They didn't want to make them feel dependent. They didn't want to make them feel, have their morale knocked down. What happens when the government takes over things? What have we learned in Venezuela? Anybody ever pay any attention to Venezuela? Venezuela, a little nation in South America, Venezuela had a real fruitcake for a leader, and he decided that he was going to go totally socialist. This is my political statement, okay? He decided he was going to go politically socialist, and so he made everything, socialized everything in the country, and you know what happened? He died. And the people in Venezuela are destitute today. You see, the money that the government had taken in, the money that the government was going to give out, it's all gone. The money's all gone. They don't have any more money. They don't have anything. They're really a poster child for why you shouldn't do socialism. And it's modern day. It's now. It's happening right now. By the way, the land of Cuba, before they were taken over by the communists, the land of Cuba was a little garden island, and people were living happy and whatever. Go to Cuba today and see what Cuba's like. They're behind, way, way far away. They're socialists, okay? Egypt did not go the route of socialism. Let's go on. And Joseph gathered up all the money. The money was gone. Verse 15, when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Pharaoh and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if the money fail. He sets up a barter system. If your money's no good, what's the next step? The next step is barter. And so what he's saying is, give me your cattle. By cattle, he means, well, he actually names them off here. Verse 17 talks of horses, talks of cattle, talks of herds, talks of asses. So they're giving up their animals. Was it a bad thing to have to give up your animals? Think about it. You're in a famine. You're having a hard time getting grain to eat. Why not give the government your cattle? You can't feed them. Take food out of your own children's mouth. So it worked out to be a pretty good thing. So they lasted for another year by giving out their cattle. Barter system. Verse number 18. When that year was ended, there came unto him a second year, and said unto him, we will not hide it from my Lord, how that our money is spent. My Lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our land. What's he talking about here? Our bodies and our land. We know what land is. What's our bodies? He's talking about labor. What we have left is our labor and the land that we have. Wherefore, verse number 19, wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them, so that the land became Pharaoh's. This is one tough famine that's going on. Anybody here ever been in a period of time without food? Not being able to eat? Nobody? Have you? Couple days, yeah. When I was in the military, one of the things we had to do is they called survival training school. And my luck of the draw happened to be Washington State in the month of January, 5 miles from the Canadian border. We were dumped in the woods and had nothing to eat. And we had to live by our wits or live by survival, skills or whatever. And we went that way 5 days. Hunger at the end of 5 days was, very, very difficult. Very hard. I mean, hunger doesn't go away. It gets worse, if anything. And I can't imagine what these people went through. They were so hungry that they sold their land, they sold their bodies, they sold everything that they had. They gave their labor, they sold it to the government. The government doesn't give them anything. They purchase. They're in the point of purchase. There are some people that say, wow, this is Joseph's scheme to make money. Well, first of all, it wasn't Joseph's scheme. The people come to Joseph. They said, buy our land and our bodies. So it wasn't Joseph's scheme, and Joseph wasn't the one that profited by it. Pharaoh profited by it. Pharaoh became title holder of the entire land of Egypt. So let's see what goes on. Let's see what Joseph comes up with. Verse 20. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, and because the famine prevailed over them, so the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he removed them to the cities, to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. Only in the land of the priests bought he not. For the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, which did eat their portion, which Pharaoh gave them. Wherefore they sold not their lands. Why did the priests get by with it? Because they were considered to be a state religion. As a state religion, they were employees of the state. Pharaoh is the state. So Pharaoh gives them their food for the services that they provide. Right? So the priests are not forced to sell their land, what land that they had. And Joseph said unto him, verse 23, and Joseph said unto the people, behold, I have bought you this day in your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, that's to be eaten, and ye shall sow the land. So he got two sets of seed to be eaten, seed to be planted. This had to be the last year of the 7 years of famine, because they're going to plant seed during the last year, during the famine of the last year, so that when they come out of the 7th year, there will be crops that will be growing, okay? So you have to be thinking in advance here, because I don't know about you, but I'm a lousy gardener, and when I plant stuff, it doesn't come up right away. It doesn't come up as soon as I want it to, but it comes up just the same. So they gave them food to eat and food to plant, okay? Verse 24, and it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the 5th part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them that are your households, and for food for your little ones. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. This is the first example that I can find in the Bible of income tax. They paid 20%, right? A 4th part of it, 20% belongs to Pharaoh. This is not a bad deal. Think about what you pay today in taxes. How would you like to pay a total amount of taxes of 20%? That'd be wonderful. They weren't complaining at all. You see, Pharaoh owned the land. Pharaoh owned the seed. So they had no obligations, right? They were allowed to stay on their land, so they didn't have to purchase the land. They had no rent to pay. They had no upkeep to pay. All they have to do is work, and for their work, they get to keep 80%. That's called sharecropping. Today we call it a blessing compared to all the tax. We pay property tax, we pay sales tax, we pay excise tax, we pay income tax, we pay school tax. I mean, and there are some that are in government, I won't mention who they are, but they want us to pay 70% in taxes. I'd rather live under the Egyptians. The people were grateful. Verse 25, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in thy sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. Verse number 26, and Joseph made it a law over the land unto this day that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests, only which became not Pharaoh's. The land of the priests, there was a religious exemption. We have a religious exemption today. As far as I know, the church doesn't pay income tax. The government would like them to, but the church doesn't pay income tax. Verse number 27. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. This is an interesting statement. They sure enough multiplied exceedingly. They went in with 70 people. Remember we talked about that last week? They went in with 70 people. 430 years later, they're going to come out with over 2.5 million people. I would say that they multiplied exceedingly. They grew over that period of time. They were blessed by God. They were separated. They were segregated. They were living in the land of Egypt, but away from the rest of the world. Okay, which was a good thing. Good thing for us too. You need to live in the land, but you don't need to be part of it. Verse number 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. What's this put the hand under the thigh thing? Did that not happen with Abraham and his servant? It's a covenant. It's a way of putting forth an oath, right? It's almost like I think of a notary seal is what we do today, okay? He said, take an oath. Don't bury me here. Why would you suppose that Jacob would not want to be buried in Egypt? Because the land had been promised, the land of Canaan had been promised to Abraham, had been promised to Isaac, had been promised to Jacob and survivors. In chapter 46, which we had read before, let's go back there. Chapter 46, verse 3, this is God speaking. He said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. This was at the at the Beersheba, at the sacrifice of Beersheba, God comes back and talks to him. What's he say? He says, verse number 4, I will go down with thee into Egypt. He's going to accompany them into Egypt. And I will also surely bring thee up again. So he said that God said he'd be with him down in Egypt, and he's going to bring them out again. Turns out it's going to be 430 years later, but he will bring them out again. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. We talked about this last week, when the term putting his hand upon his eyes, which means he would close his eyes in death. All right? So now we're at the point in chapter 47, speaking about the last days of Joseph, verse 27. In verse 28, Joseph lived in the land 17 years, so forth. Verse 29, and the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, if now I have found grace in thy sight, put thine hand under my thigh. Deal kindly and truly with me, bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And he said, swear unto me. And he sware unto him. And Israel bowed himself upon his bed's head. Where was Abraham and Isaac and all those buried? They were buried in Canaan land. They were buried near Mamre. They were buried in the cave of Machpelah that Abraham had actually purchased. He's saying, take me back to my family, my kinfolk. Bury me in their, if you will, their plot, in their land. And he swore that he would. Chapter 48. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, behold, I will make thee fruitful, multiply thee, will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. He's rehearsing here the same promise that God had made to Abraham, that God had made to Isaac. He's rehearsing, God met me at Luz. Luz is another word for Bethel. It turns out he met him there twice. And he's rehearsing or reiterating the promise. The Abrahamic covenant has been passed down to Isaac. Verse number 5. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. What is this talking about here? You need to understand and go back. Who did Jacob go down into Uncle Laban's camp to marry? Who did he want as his wife? Rachel. Did he not want Rachel? He didn't want anybody else. He wanted Rachel. He was willing to work 7 years for Rachel. He got tricked into taking Leah. And then he was willing to work another 7 years for Rachel. He worked 14 years for the love of his life. Who was her firstborn? Her firstborn was Joseph. Rachel's firstborn was Joseph. Okay? She had two children, Joseph and Benjamin. So had Jacob gotten his wish and only had married the love of his life, who would Jacob's firstborn be? Be Joseph, would it not? What's the firstborn to receive? A double portion. We're going to find out here that what Jacob has done, Jacob has effectively adopted Manasseh and Ephraim, the two sons of Joseph, and they've become equal with Reuben and Simeon. Read it again. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee unto Egypt, are, what's it say? Mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. He's giving them equal status with Reuben and Simeon. Reuben was the firstborn, was he not? And Simeon came after as the secondborn. So he's giving Ephraim and Manasseh equal status to Reuben and Simeon. What he's saying is, Joseph, I'm going to give you a double portion. One portion through Manasseh, one portion through Simeon. He's going to give you a double portion. Turns out he's going to bless, later on we're going to read, he's going to bless all the different boys. Judah is given a double portion. Interestingly enough, Judah's double portion includes the spiritual blessing. Joseph's double portion does not. And we'll get to there next week. Let's close in prayer. Brother Doyle, would you close us in prayer?